All right, welcome back to Two Stupid Guys Trade Stocks. I'm Vinny.
I'm Dylan.
He thinks he's Dylan. So if you're new here, we at Two Stupid Guys Trade Stocks are all about entertaining, investing, education. So that's what Dylan and I are going to be talking about, a topic today called ESG investing. Dylan's never heard of it. I told him not to look it up. I just wanted to see what his honest take on some of this stuff was.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening right now, so
Yeah.
we'll see. I don't know what ESG investing is.
Yeah, it's all good. So if you enjoy this kind of content, by all means, consider giving us a sub. We're desperately close to 900. You could be the one to put us over the edge there. But anyway, so ESG is an acronym, stands for Environmental Social Governance. That sound a little more familiar?
No.
No? Still no? No, it's like socially responsible investing, basically, is the basic core premise.
Oh.
Yeah. The same way, you kind of vote with your dollars when you buy something somewhere, right? You don't buy diamonds from a company that mines them with child labor in Africa, right?
Right. Okay. I have mixed feelings about this.
So, it wasn't quite as, it was more interesting than I expected. I completely blew it off before as some hippy dippy stuff. I'm a capitalist pig at heart, and I thought it wouldn't really agree with me. But the more I read about it, the more interesting it actually is. And one of the things that I think is majorly important is the trend. I mean, did you look at that? Look at this graph. This is ESG investing.
Okay, so that's parabolic.
Yeah, parabolic, right? ESG dollars, according to it was this source right here. You're looking at almost, it was 33% of, right here, 33% of all invested dollars. A third are in ESG funds.
Yeah, but who qualifies what company is ESG?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and there's not really a good answer for that. There are a couple companies out there that rank companies in terms of whether or not they comply with ESG. There are a whole wide swath of ESG funds, and then some of them are very specific. There are clean water investing funds. There are, companies that within the ESG realm that still own oil stocks. Only about 3% of the funds are invested in oil, but there are still some out there.
How
could oil be sustainable? Yeah. See, that's the thing, is it's not really a hard and fast definition for what truly represents ESG. And one of the interesting things that, have you ever heard of this guy, Chamath Palihapitiya?
Yeah. Didn't he just sell a bunch of space?
Yeah, Virgin Space. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Virgin Galactic. So, this is an interview from him from last year where he's basically calling this entire sector a complete fraud.
Okay. All right. He's successful.
One of the macro trends that kind of has gone on with investing over the last few years is, like I showed you that graph of ESG just going parabolic. But, people have kind of caught on to the fact that actively managed mutual funds were not in their best interest, right? People were paying high fees and not getting a higher return from an actively managed fund compared to an index fund. Have you heard of this?
Right. Yes.
All right. So there was this big
Cathie Wood's deal.
Well, that's a little different, but people were kind of rotating into more S&P 500 index fund. That's where a lot of retirement money goes now. People are no longer using, the Vanguard growth ETF or whatever you want to say, right? Because you're paying higher fees and you're not necessarily getting a higher return. One of the ways that companies have been able to, by this I mean mutual fund companies, have been able to stem this tide of this kind of roll in money or roll over money, is by going after these ESG labels.
So, okay, is this one of those things where how we were all shoved just milk down our throats because a bunch of studies came out produced by milk and dairy that you're supposed to eat milk and dairy?
Yeah.
Is this one of these things?
I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say quite to that ilk, because there's some interesting stuff behind ESG's utility. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting here is if you look at the performance of ESG funds, I'll pull this up here. There are quite a few of them that have done very well. I mean, this is 2020 returns here. You're talking 30, 40%, or more for the top 20, top 10 here. So they are capable of achieving like quite an outsized return, despite the fact that they're having a focus on sustainability. And they're not necessarily putting themselves at a disadvantage. There was a debate or a thought process early on that these ESG funds would be, I would say, handicapped, right? Because they would be choosing from a smaller universe of stocks that would fit their criteria.
Right.
But in fact, because of like the things that the ESG companies look at, they tend to be more heavily tech weighted. So they tend to do well in the modern economy, where tech tends to be a pretty strong sector, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's some interesting tailwinds too that I wanted to talk about. So we talk about, by generation, right? The oldest millennials are about to turn 40. And millennials are really the ones that kind of are pushing this, right? That's where it started. It's not entirely just millennials at this point, though. Everyone has kind of come around to the fact that you want to have good corporate citizens. You can't just be like polluting the river, Mr. Burns style from The Simpsons, and destroying everything
Right.
for every dollar, right? You want to have companies that are focused on producing long-term growth for their company in a sustainable manner. Can't just destroy everything today. But yeah, definitely millennials are a big push behind this, but you're seeing it in other kind of generations as well, becoming a larger and larger factor when considering, except for the baby boomers.
I have a very interesting. What is the abbreviation? ESG?
Yeah, environmental, social, governance.
Okay.
What's your thought?
So, I hope people are still watching. Are you familiar with DuPont?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with what they did to the planet?
I mean, I can't say I know in detail. I know Teflon is pretty questionable, but
Yeah, and how there's like a certain amount of like I can't remember if it's called PPDs, but it essentially poison an entire town, give a ton of people cancer.
oh, the thing in India.
No, that was here. That was in America.
Oh, there was one in India as well. I think it was DuPont as well.
I believe it was them too.
Yeah.
And how there's like a certain amount of I can't remember. I'll have to look it up. It's PP something rating in all humans on Earth because of that company.
Oh,
Okay,
boy.
so they're in ESG funds.
Yeah.
So there's actually a whole movie. I think Mark Ruffalo's in it. He's the lawyer, and it explains how many people they murdered and killed.
Yeah.
And they have one of the highest ESG risk ratings.
Perfect. Yeah. That was one thing that was actually kind of interesting. Obviously, the data's all over the map. I looked at, there was a 2019 Morgan Stanley analysis where they talked about the fact that ESG-oriented companies tend to have kind of higher lows when the market is down. So they kind of give you some downside protection, was their argument. There was another study that, not exactly ESG, but one of the factors within ESG, within social, is kind of like employee welfare. And they looked at the last several decades of data on the top 100 places to work. And they found that on average, companies that were in the top 100 workplaces in the United States outperformed in terms of annual rate of return in the stock market by about 2% per year. Employees are happy, the company does well.
Yeah, that's like AMD. That's how they got their Epic chips. If you ever read that story.
Yeah, exactly. So I pulled up a couple different lists of some ESG companies that you can actually kind of consider. This one's a little bit long. Microsoft is a pretty popular pick amongst ESG companies. I didn't see the DuPont on the list that I looked at here. Salesforce is another one.
I'm looking up some of the stuff, and it is riveting that this company is on an ESG. And I don't know if whoever like votes or decides this didn't know this, but they're one of, actually, if you look up, I can't remember, but it's top 3 worst companies for humanity. They're also on that list. So,
I love it. Yeah, I thought you might find this interesting too. This is another list on best companies for ESG investing, and the Edwards Life Sciences. Your significant other work for them?
no, Phillips.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad. I thought they did, but Microsoft, pretty popular one. Hasbro actually is a local company to me. Employee life there, I think, is pretty good from what I've heard. They have half day Fridays, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I've been told that's a very great company.
Yeah,
I'm
same.
actually surprised Salesforce is on there.
Salesforce is interesting one. I want to do a deeper dive into Salesforce. They in terms of like their kind of discounted cash flow, they're actually priced relatively well in this modern market, and they're scoring well on the ESG fronts as well, which is another trend to be nice to be in front of. As we're going to see this continue to evolve over the next probably couple decades at least, I'd imagine.
Right. And I know that Salesforce is a competitor to PLTR.
Yeah.
And it made me really uneasy when I saw their numbers. I'm like, that's definitely a better investment. So
yeah, but one of the things that was inconsistent. If you look at this, though, there's a lot of kind of variety in terms of the ratings here. Like, they're saying that their ESG rating up here is AA, but then there's a C over here. There's not any hard set criteria on what it should or should not be included in terms of like ESG criteria. I don't know. One of the things that kind of made me think about this is I watched the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting this year, and Berkshire Hathaway caught a lot of flack or several questions about their recent investment in Chevron. And if you notice in the most recent 13F filing, Berkshire Hathaway actually halved their Chevron stock holding.
Oh,
yeah,
I did not see that.
Yep, yeah, they bought into them in the fourth. The position may have been started in the third quarter of 2020, but then they already halved it in the first quarter of 2021.
Oh boy, okay, that's he doesn't make a lot of moves too.
Yeah, he's pretty slow with his moves, but yeah, they already halved it. There were definitely some questions about that at the annual stockholder meeting. The U.S. is interesting too in that we don't require corporations to disclose some of the ESG criteria, and Berkshire Hathaway even themselves has kind of fought against some of them. One in particular, I know they were asking for kind of diversity numbers from all the various operating units within Berkshire Hathaway, and Buffett was basically like, we value diversity, but he's like, I'm not going to require my managers to spend time preparing these reports on this stuff when it's not something that's required.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to be that guy, but I'm also in the stock market to make money.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm torn, because like I want to be one. The DuPont is 112th out of 448, by the way, for its industry. So I don't know what the other like 300 companies did to ruin the world, but I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty torn because like I also want to make a bunch of money, and I'm in an oil company right now. I don't want to be in them long term, but I recommended Oxy, our swing video. I feel it's still setting up, so I'm gonna take it.
It's definitely interesting. Like that Chamath interview, he talked about the financial incentives behind pursuing this ESG label too. According to him, like I didn't verify this independently, but by receiving the ESG label, companies are then able to borrow from the European Central Bank at a negative interest rate effectively at that point in time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he was talking about JP Morgan. He's like, yeah, sure. It's like they put that label on themselves and they can borrow this negative interest rate. It's part like a marketing tool. And then also there's a financial incentive for them to do so at this point.
Yeah. I feel like you have to have hard set criteria, and you also have to have like a board of one entity that decides who's in and who's out.
Yeah.
You can't just have like all these other people being like, yeah, maybe they're fine.
Yeah. There's like companies out there that do the ESG ratings. One of the more popular ones is this one I just pulled up, the MSCI ESG ratings. There are a couple of companies out there that do these. But they have different criterias, and even like if you depends on what your moral compass is. They have, I think it was 37 different criteria that they rank a company based on, and you can't have top scores in all 37 categories. It just would be basically impossible. So that you have to decide for yourself like which ones matter more to you. But
Right.
yeah, they have a good website. They have a bunch of different tools on like what sort of characteristics feature into their framework for ESG. But
Do we know if like all stocks are rated for this, or can we like search a stock?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure, like what, how wide encompassing this is. Certainly, anything like S&P 500 is going to be, something that's rated in this manner, but not, per se, like, some of these small cap companies be just too difficult for them to have that sort of data.
Oh boy, I'm sorry. I'm still reading about the DuPont stuff.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. What's that?
They achieved the 4th highest ESG rating in the chemical subsector.
Yeah,
If no one understands, they're the Darth Vader of companies.
Maybe that's backlash, though, Dylan. Maybe that was because they killed so many people in their past that now they've actually gotten proactive about safety.
No, it's not that they killed so many people in the past. It's that they continued to,
Yeah.
and then admitted to it, and then refused to pay, and then it's like, oh, okay, fine, we'll pay, and by that point, they had poisoned the whole earth.
Yeah, one of my hobbies is watching like disaster analysis videos here on YouTube, and DuPont has come up numerous times.
Yeah, I remember when you look at like worst companies on earth, it's always DuPont and some company that made ineffective airbags.
Oh, Takata.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, the Toyota one. Yeah.
Yep, it's those two companies.
All right, guys. Well, let us know down below in the description. I'm just curious how often people are using ESG factors and deciding their investments. It's not something I personally applied before, but maybe I will start looking at it a little bit more going forward. Interested in long-term sustainable growth.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards using it, like, because I won't ever invest in DuPont unless like the chart looks really good. But
yeah, exactly.
But other than that,
yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. Let us know down below if you used any of the ESG factors. I'm just curious, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Have a good one.